You see, something is going to happen. Something wonderful.
My God, it's full of stars.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. In this episode, I am joined by the mad scientist herself, Lisa. And I also do have my boy, JJ Vance. You already know who he is, I'm sure. He's the host of Operation GCD. And if you want to check out his stuff, his links will be in the bottom. And tonight we have a guest on for Laurel Canyon. I'm very, very interested in that topic. And I'll be honest, unfortunately, the first guest I ever had on my show, this is only the second one now that covered that topic, I probably got more complaints actually about incorrect facts. So I guess this is a part two, and hopefully this one will go a little bit better. It's unfortunately that was actually probably the most complained about a show I ever had, with emails and people like, yo, that was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong. I was just
wow.
Yo, I was live too, and I was just like, no. You know, what do you say? So hopefully this one will go a little bit better. And for that, we got BT from the Truth and Shadow podcast. Please let everybody know what's going on, where they can find your stuff, and I guess give a little bit of a background about what the show's about or what you're into.
Yeah, man. So like I said, I host Truth and Shadow podcast. I also co-host unrefinedpodcast.com. But anyways, my show is basically the intersection where the supernatural and Christian faith stuff converge, and we're looking at the unseen realm. We spend a lot of time looking at angels, demons, other supernatural entities. I mean, I just did an episode on Bigfoot and covering everything in between. Just talk about things, find out where the good is, find out where the evil is, and work in between and resolve some of those issues, because we're really seeing some major struggle between us humans and then what I'm calling the sinister forces, that being the fallen angels, unclean spirits, and then those who work with it, the Bohemians, the dark occultists, etc., desiring an end of humanity, it seems. And you can find me YouTube, truthandshadowpodcast.com. I've only got one episode that isn't available on there. YouTube knocked it off because I was talking about the stuff coming across the border, child trafficking. Yeah. So they popped that one off the YouTube. But I'm on iTunes, Audible, Spreaker. I'm on all of the major podcasting sites. I don't do live recording, so many of you are getting to see my face for the first time.
Oh, wow. Look at that. Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice. And I will make sure after the fact that I'll get all your links from you. I'll make sure I add it in the description, especially for like the podcast, and when this drops everywhere, everybody's stuff will be in the bottom. And I was on his show, and I actually had a really good time. So go check that out.
It was. Yeah. That one hasn't dropped yet, Nick.
Okay. All right.
Rude or disrespectful.
I don't even know, dude.
I had a week load of that week, bro. I had one person every single day that week, because it was the only time I can get people on.
I've done that.
And that's just the way it works.
No, I understand. So then you have like a month's worth of shows done in a week. So
yeah,
I totally get it.
A lot of shows to do.
But yeah. So the conversation, we're going to be talking about Laurel Canyon. I guess what was it that really got you into wanting to cover this topic? And I know this is kind of like a passion for you as well. You were saying,
right? Yeah. So I had been speaking. Like I said, I co-host with unrefinedpodcast.com. So I've been speaking with Brandon Spain and his co-host, Lindsay Waters. And we were talking about wanting to do a series on Laurel Canyon way back in, I want to say, October, December of 2023. So for a while we were talking about, hey, we should do this series. And then we started spending time in December, January, really hashing down and getting some details. And for Brandon and Lindsay, they really like the music scene. They have a lot of passion with the music industry, and they just get it. You know, they understand things, you know, Mamas and the Papas and all of the music bands that are kick big time in the 60s, 70s, right? And that's a lot of the details that I personally didn't know. I didn't know about a lot of the hippie scene, a lot of the freak scene, it was called, during the 60s and that era. But I knew about Charles Manson's history, and then quite a bit because I spent some time studying and researching occult adjacent esoteric systems. And doing so, you start looking at what I would call, hidden histories. I shouldn't really call them hidden histories, to be fair, because you can read Cornelius Agrippa anytime you want, right? So it's not like it's hidden. So basically, I was reading stuff that I wasn't allowed to as a Christian child growing up, discovering things like Wicca and occultism and esotericism. And I was just reading all this information about Crowley and John Dee and all these individuals. So I had a bit of background when it came to like the occult world. And Charles Manson was like this hub, this center point that seems to have drawn many to looking at Laurel Canyon because of the Tate murders. And, as we know, Manson died not too long ago in prison. But I mean, there's just this long line of history. And gosh, man, what really got me looking at this is I started looking, I looked at the modern topics, Laurel Canyon's in the Hollywood Hills. All right, that's cool. And Hollywood's kind of a big deal, but you hear news like Jared Leto just buys Lookout Mountain, and you're like, okay, that's kind of weird. What's Lookout Mountain? And you start looking and seeing this was a place that the Air Force used and the Army had used to make propaganda films in the 40s for World War II. And I just wanted to dig into this and find the background that seemed to have led institutions, government agencies, individuals to this place instead of some other location.
That's actually an interesting way to think about it. Like, why is this such a hot spot? I have often wondered that when you see things like this. Is there like ley lines? Is there something from there in the past? JJ's, their mounds. There's always like something, what's the deal with this area? Why? And I do think when you see, unless like sometimes I think like it just might be a good area to do organized crime, maybe this is happening, but sometimes I do think there is specifics, like much more than we'd ever think about why these people are all in that area.
Yeah. When I started looking at Hollywood, the thing was this inventor, Thomas Edison, owned all the patent rights when it came to film and making films and how to record films. And so he owned all of. So if you wanted to make a film over there in New York or anywhere else, the G-men would show up and shut you down. So they started coming all the way to the West Coast, where it was really difficult by train to get all the way across the United States. It took, it was quite an effort, So Hollywood kind of kicks off. They start making films and things. And anytime they hear the G-men are coming by telegram, they just pack all their stuff up and go down to Mexico and hang out until they show up and everything blows over and come back up and start filming again. And eventually, that basically becomes such a headache and such an expense of the government's pocket. They stop doing this.
That is a wild way to operate, like just packing up and skipping on the feds and coming back and everything is cool for a while.
American West, right?
Yeah. To piggyback on your statements with some of the occult stuff kind of the occult reason why they picked that area, I would agree. There's got to be some sort of occult kind of perspective that caused them to choose that area of Laurel Canyon. Just look at just for a reference point, look at all the occultism that has existed throughout this whole narrative of Laurel Canyon. From the onset of the residency of the canyon with all these Hollywood stars of the early Hollywood, all the way through the 60s and 70s.
Exactly.
Plenty of the bands were named after occult. They had occult names from the Mamas and the Papas.
Right.
The Grateful Dead. All these bands originated with occult names. There's occult themes throughout a lot of the songs, even into the 70s with Steve Miller Band and Abracadabra. So there's exactly. It's a multi-decade trend, since the beginning. So I would agree there was purpose behind picking that location.
Yeah, and I started looking at the local area, historically speaking, and there was an indigenous peoples group there, and I'm horrible at remembering names and then even worse at pronouncing them, but there was an indigenous group that considered the area a sacred place where their gods came down. And that in itself is, that just speaks, Stargate, that's gateway to the gods kind of stuff. That's, a Babylon kind of situation. And perhaps that's enough of a motivator to send people in to exploit what would be an occult hub.
It was, I believe it was the Tokova people, and they were a Natwal speaking people, which not while we covered that in the apparition of the Guadalupe, Virgin of Guadalupe, is that the Nahuatl people are descendants of, I think it was a Uto-Aztecian language or something, and that it was a merge between the Utes and the Aztec. But anyway, the Nahuatl are people from, the whole Toltec, serpent god, all that other stuff. That's where the offshoot comes from.
Man. Lots of tie-ins. That's awesome. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah. No.
I couldn't pronounce Tongva to save my life.
No, it's okay.
Couldn't remember it.
Oh, you're fine. I can hardly pronounce anything either. So.
Right.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I'm looking at this and I'm seeing these weird connections, weird tie-ins. But you know what's going on in Los Angeles, California? The rise of Spiritism in the 1840s gets huge in Los Angeles. Right. So you got people doing seances, you got people, playing with magic phlegm or whatever, ectoplasm and doing weird things. And there's a massive drive pulling people in. And I mean, tarot read, it was everywhere in Los Angeles. And then, basically some guy came along and he's like, hey, I really want to make my own town over here. And it was early, I think it was after Civil War, Hollywood starts. And this guy's like, I want to make a dry town in California. And, he sets it up and he gets this little, a dry town being no alcohol and, no kind of liquor of any kind. And he sets it up and he gets it going, but he finds out that he can't get any water from Los Angeles because Los Angeles has all the water. And they're like, no, we're not going to give you anything. And so eventually the town peters out after a dozen or so years, and gets incorporated into Los Angeles.
One thing I did notice,
so that's how the Hollywood Hills, the Laurel Canyon area started right there, huh?
Right. It all starts right there.
You had water right to that dispute as well, because that's water such at the heart of all of LA.
They didn't want to give any of the water away to send it on over to, Laurel Canyon for people, Hollywood area, Laurel Canyon is, if you look at a map of Los Angeles, from the center of Los Angeles, if I were to say the Air Force Base that was there, I think it's a Space Force base now. It's like 10.
It's still there, yeah.
It's just right there. And so it's not like a big distance to send some water over there. They just were like, no, we're not going to send water to a dry town. And we escaped all that to be over here. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, that's the plot line. Speaking of some of the Laurel Canyon scene, that's the plot line of Chinatown. Roman Polanski's Chinatown, starring Jack Nicholson, produced by Bob Cocaine Evans, speaking of process church connections, supposedly through the West Coast contingent of some of those operations with Bob Cocaine and Polanski and gang there. But yeah, that's the plot line of Chinatown, is the dispute over water rights of, establishing the city of Los Angeles. So I think that's an interesting storyline relative to that's how Laurel Canyon started too, over the same kind of disputes.
Wow. Yeah. That's an interesting one.
One thing I did notice, I just ran it real quick. It was just happenstance, I guess. There's probably just more of coincidence. But Laurel Canyon in Hebrew gematria, it does equal sacred geometry.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe there is something to do with that place. Who knows? Yeah.
So
it seems like the natives thought so, huh?
Huh?
So it seems like the natives thought it was a special place, right? So I wonder what. Really wonder what is getting channeled through that area there, because again, it's with Jared Leto's movie studio, as you mentioned. We really don't know the storyline there. That's not really a public narrative, right? Like that's very much kind of still an occulted narrative regarding what actually transpired there when it was an operational studio, and it was very unique in its existence. So, yeah, that energy is probably being produced for something there, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, the Lookout Mountain, it was the Bureau of Motion Pictures is what the established was by the United States Office of War.
Nice.
So the U.S. Army, basically it was like they would have scripts that were allowed to be filmed in Hollywood, but they controlled if the film would be pro-America, that was fine. But if they did anything that was anti-America or so much for free speech, right? But anyways, anything that looked bad for the American image, the government right there, because they're right there. Their army base is right there in Hollywood. So they just come down and say, no, you can't film that. Any scripts you want to make, anything you want to film, you need to come and send it to us. And so they got, they get all this permission, but it's just telling everybody what they were allowed to film at Lookout Mountain, and they filmed commercials, propaganda. They would get the actors, the big guys, you know, Charlie Chaplin would come up and be like, hey, buy this deodorant or whatever the big scheme was. And that was the aim, is to convince Americans what to buy. And that's we get the idea of like propaganda, and using it in media was banned for so long until a couple of years back.
Yeah, right.
They weren't allowed to do this at all on news or on media, and now, you know, they're back. Anyways, right back to doing it.
You might find interesting.
But I think it's a great location for all that whatever. Like, if it's some sort of energy node, that's reason why they've been producing some stuff like that there. Maybe.
Yeah, there's no reason why not. I mean, you know, if you read about like the Black Dahlia murder goes off with a guy who was involved in the movie scene, right? And this guy, whatever they're into. I mean, if we were to watch like the Black Dahlia, the movie that came out not too long ago, it's probably super sus, but neither here nor there on the idea of private ritual. We have enough experience in the occult world that we know ritual is a thing. I mean, we're not, this isn't a conspiracy. The La La Land is serious. They were doing rituals of some kind. I mean, you don't kill someone in that situation, drain them of blood, and then put them somewhere else. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't correlate if there was no ritual involved.
Right.
If people want to get real specific, if there was like a designed method of what they did with that body, regardless if they're invoking anything, it was done ritualistically, just like it is when we brush our teeth and have our cup of coffee in the morning. Right. That's a ritual. It's just you know what I'm saying? So
surgically, you know.
Yeah, exactly. If you want to get like real specific about it, it was probably ritualistic in some sense, regardless. You know.
Yeah, but you know, the crazy thing was like, dude, in the 1940s, man, in Hollywood, like 90 million Americans across the United States, they were going to movies all the time. There was basically a bourgeoisie and a proletariat that kind of developed in here, and the poor people were able to finally go and see movies. They were able to go see drama on a screen because they can afford it now. Whereas opposed to the rich people, they still went to theater because they could afford the more expensive productions, as opposed to honestly mass produced silver screen media. So you got a lot of people being able to just go, and you can do commercials. I mean, you go and you watch a movie today, you're going to get come down and have a Coca-Cola. I mean, that's just a common sense thing. It's going to be on the film. You're going to see that. Of course, they do it right before the movie starts, so I'm not going to go waste my time. Just saying.
You know, what's interesting is that California has notoriously been the hub for cults, like where they start, and then the most influential the world over, I think. And then to have an Air Force base that's specialized in, I guess, television manipulation, and how it kicks off in the late 40s. I believe it was 1947 or something. And you see all these influential things happening in 1947, you know, and you're shaping the American mind. And at the backdrop of it, behind the curtain, you have this Lookout Mountain laboratory where you have scientists, you have filmmakers, you have all these people coming out and just like becoming very prolific and influential within the film studio. And then later to see how it morphs into the music industry, which becomes, you know, extremely influential the world over again. Yeah. So it's very,
not too
very
far.
Fascinating.
Not too far away, there's a base that they moved a lot of the Operation Paperclip Nazis to there in California.
Makes sense. Okay.
I can't remember the name of that base.
Is that Edwards?
No, I don't remember. I can't speak on that. I don't remember the name.
I think it's Edwards Air Force Base. It's over there in Riverside County. Yeah, right near the Scientology headquarters.
There you go. Bring the Nazis and
perfect.
Right. Like that doesn't have a tie-in, right?
Something I've heard, maybe you can actually let me know if I'm correct or not, but didn't Jim Jones, before he moved to, where did he go, to Guyana or some shit? I heard that he had a spot near Manson's, or not too far from Laurel Canyon, before he made that jump. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was just recently, I was looking at Jim Jones. I was looking at Jim Jones because because of the cult tie-in that Lisa was just mentioning, and because, Jim Jones and the Kool-Aid thing, where he was at is Southern California, and it is in the area. And no, Lisa, you're absolutely right with these weird cults. The earliest one actually kicked off with this guy named William Monet. You can go back and look him up. He was an interesting character. And he basically started this. It was a Christian style offshoot cult. I mean, aren't they all? But anyways, he marries this Mexican woman. Yeah. And they're fine, but he like escapes to Mexico to get away from the feds because, I mean, whatever he's doing is illegal. She marries a Spanish man. They have a child. And I mean, it's just like this insane. It's Hollywood. She shoots and kills the guy. The daughter, Mooney's, or Mooney's ex-wife's daughter murders this guy for trying to seduce her. I mean, it was like,
wow,
this is like reality
some kind
TV.
of something is going on in this disordered situation that is mind-boggling and kind of has this weird beginnings, like Jim Jones. I mean, Jim Jones, Jack Parsons in the Parsonage. I mean, all of these things.
Wasn't it called the Moonies or something like that? Or no?
I don't think
Oh.
I don't think so. I think that was a different group because that's Florida.
Okay.
That popped into my head when he
okay.
said that, and I was like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know what, but you said Mooney. I was like Moonies or something. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
There are a lot of cults in California, almost too many to count. It really over the years, like it's so many of them. It's almost been used as a petri dish for intelligence agencies creating these organizations.
I mean, why not? Right. I mean, it seems to be the.
Yeah.
And then you have the pinnacle of all mental manipulation, Esalen, and then you have Stanford, research, and it's just all right there. The root system is right there.
Because I mean, there was a cult that had grown out of University Berkeley, right there too. I can't remember Rit's name. I was researching these cult names and trying to find. And it was like cult after cult after cult after cult. And you're like, okay, well, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking at each individual ones because those are rabbit trails that I'm just not going to invest in at this time to just talk about kind of where we wanted to go with Laurel Canyon and its series and just show that the propaganda, the PSYOP propaganda really began infecting men. If you follow like a biblical narrative, you go look at Garden of Eden and you're like Adam and Eve and the serpent, and that's where you want to look at the first PSYOP. That's fine, you could do that, but it's like that's what you do is from my perspective, I look and I see the first PSYOP is Satan trying to convince Eve, hey, you can eat that, it's not going to cause you any problems, you're not going to die, the problem is you're going to be like gods, and then you're going to be like us who are here in the garden, because it didn't seem weird that Eve was talking to the serpent, Seraphim or whatever he might have been, or it might have been. They were accustomed to talking to things that were unseen, or what we would call unseen today, in that area. And so they get this back and forth. It was like, that's a psychological operation. Mess with their heads. Says, you're not going to die. You're going to be a god. You're going to be like us. Don't you want to be like us? And then that just begins this whole fall.
It's so interesting that you said that, because I was like thinking about
classic question of a demon, right?
I guess because my brother's like been watching stuff on Netflix, I guess, about Moses, and he's been asking me stuff about the Bible or whatever. And I was like thinking about the Garden of Eden for some reason, and I was like, why does it seem so normal that a human was having a conversation with a snake?
Right. And then why was the curse?
I'm like, wait, how did we get to that?
Yeah.
Like,
so can we crawl on his belly and eat dust? I mean, that's snakes do.
How was the interpretation? Like, I don't know.
Totally normal.
I just thought about that. I'm like, yo, wait, the whole basis on this shit is from a snake talking to a chick.
Right. And so I looked at that, it's like the words nefesh. Nefesh could be like fiery, it basically like a seraphim or some kind of, an angelic being. I mean, that's, if that's what, if the Garden of Eden was basically an in-between space of heaven and earth, well, demon eventually, we consider demon, from the research that I've done, I call demons the ones that are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. Those are the demons. And then the fallen angels angels, just what you want to call them, they're the fallen ones. And so it's like the ones that seem to be possessing people, sure, they're fallen angels, but they seem to be demons because they go out to the wilderness. They don't have anywhere to go. So, I mean, there's just this following these ideas of the unclean spirits and kind of seeing these different ways that they seem to work with mankind and through time. And it's seems that they work in areas where there's massive occult power, these Loki of power going on. I'm drawn to it.
I do think something is up with California for sure. I mean, I would even wonder if like just the whole state or a good portion of the state might be, important with occultism. I mean, there was times where I even thought that, during the whole like George Floyd and COVID situation, I do think there was a lot of occult symbology going on at that point. And like there was times where I did think that all the shit going on in California, especially the wildfires, was in a way of showing like the Scarlet Whore kind of like being burnt out down to the ground.
Massive amount of energy. I mean,
yeah. And it's like, it's got to go somewhere. It has to go somewhere. It doesn't. Sometimes I wonder, is that why we see wild shit here and then explosions and bombs over there, or vice versa? Right. Is it just a transfer of energy? It's going to have to do something somewhere. Eventually.
You guys just had an earthquake over there. I think I saw something in the news about that. I mean, why not? I mean, there's massive earthquakes in California. There was a huge one when I was a kid growing up. Carlsbad, there was, the one in Los Angeles that hit people, was it 93, 94? I mean, that's energy being released, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a cold history to just the origins of California too. Back, dating back to the Mormons and the early Mormon settlements, and even in recent years, just exhibited by the Cistercian monks, the monks that created the Knights Templar, the monastical order that created the Knights Templar. There's an outfit of them up in Northern California that moved one of the religious houses of the Knights Templar from Spain from the 13th century. Moved it over to America and rebuilt it over there in Northern California. So that's a lot of effort to do something like that. There's got to be some sort of like deeper occult purpose for that stuff and that site. So there's a lot of that going on still today in California, I think.
I wonder if it has anything to, you brought up the Mormons, and then we had talked about how the previous indigenous tribe that was there, that was not well speaking, and their belief system was based, like we said, the serpent cult. And I mean, Nick did an amazing job covering Quetzalcoatl, and they believed in that, which was the serpent god. And in their belief system, they believe the serpent itself connects all the realms together, and that, from life to death or whatever. And then you see the Mormons adopting that type of, or not Mormons, but offshoots further up the chain, type of belief system. And then you see this kind of replaying itself out in the belief system in terms of like spiritualism that comes about in the 40s and then in the 60s or whatever. Sure. And I wonder how much of that is that basis. And then they're just like building upon it. Every psychological operation, just building upon the next one. But
evolution.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned.
Interesting.
You mentioned Mormons, went back to Mormons, and I do think I do forget about that a lot. And maybe JJ, you can, maybe even from your own experience, maybe when we covered, I think maybe we came across it because of covering Skinwalker Ranch, which I was going to bring up, that it does remind me, you got a little bit of the Native American stuff being very important for Skinwalker Ranch. You have that for this spot over here. It seems to be some weird shit going over at Skinwalker Ranch, and when we covered Skinwalker Ranch, there was Mormons who actually did believe that these are probably little offshoots and little sects that would go to Quetzalcoatl, would go to the pyramid and I guess go visit it, and they actually thought Quetzalcoatl was Jesus Christ. I mean, I was finding shit like this.
I was going to say that. Yeah, I was going to say that is a Mormon belief for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and just funny how like you brought up Mormons in California, and when we covered Skinwalker Ranch, it was all Mormons and Masons with supposed evidence of what's going on over there. It's just very
big time Mormons.
That's interesting to think about.
Big pot of just stuff. You can reach in and get anything out of that thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Right.
Do you ever think that maybe could even be another situation? I would almost say a little bit kind of like the idea of like smiley face killers, where you got probably a bunch of different groups that are just taking advantage of a way to get rid of somebody. Do you think there could be people who aren't so much really associated with everybody else, but understands like what's going on kind of over there and wants to take advantage of it also? It's not like everybody's connected, but there could be groups or I guess others, occultists or magicians that are like, oh, this is a prime spot. Let me get in on this magic in action. Do you think everything's literally connected?
No, I wouldn't say it's connected that way. I think the current is connected. I think the current is exactly what they're drawing from.
Yes, that's what. Yeah.
But if you go back and you look at all the hubs, London was a huge occult hub for a really long period of time. Yeah. You had stuff in Germany. Yes, you had stuff in Italy. You had stuff Egypt. I mean, Alexandria, Egypt, massive hub. You know, in ancient history times.
Sure.
Boston, Massachusetts was pretty big.
Do you ever think people try to the point where it's like, we want to put this place on the map amongst occultists? Do you ever think like maybe that's where they're pushing so hard at Skinwalker Ranch? They're like, we want this to be put on the map as magical workings.
And the nod. You want to get all the wink, nod, nods. But I mean, gosh, there's just so much. The thing is what I kept finding was, somebody had said that there was a split within ancient occultism. There's a split. Basically, you have this Dionysian on one side and Typhonian on another. And I think Kenneth Grant picks up on the Typhonian after Crowley. And Crowley was kind of Dionysian. And the difference is Dionysian is like sex, ritual, magic. And then Typhonian is chaos. Just throw it out of the wind, and whatever you get, and you just work with whatever you can. Just throw it all into a melting pot. If you can get H.P. Lovecraft to work for you, do it. Right.
And I would even consider Typhonian the beast. And like, I think all those would be side effects of an unleashed beast. You know what I'm saying? Like,
why not?
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you there.
It's okay. But anyways, there seemed to be a massive split within the occult world. These two ideas and Hollywood is really hedonistic. I mean, you find out it's just, was it sex, drugs, and whatever. And that became really the big establishment in the 60s was free love, right? The hippie movement, the anti-war movement. I mean, the cultural perspective was designed to be changed into a specific mode. And that was, JJ, we would say the CIA operated that. They wanted to get people to be, anti-war for the war establishment. I mean, was it the war pigs that were the problem, or, what was really going on, and why California? Why was that where they wanted to start the countercultural revolution?
Yeah, I think you're spot on as far as an intelligence operation to co-opt some of those activities, because the early onset of the counterculture in the 1960s, the anti-war movement, if you will, was not hippies. Hippies were an invention that was co-opting that movement. And, so I think, that's one element of the Laurel Canyon scene. And I think, to speak to Nick's point in some of the discussion we've had here about feuding occultists, I like the way you kind of divided the two sides there, BT. That makes a lot. I don't know a ton about the occult. From what I know, though, that makes a lot of sense to me, how you frame that. But I think if you look at all the murder that went on in Laurel Canyon, I mean, specifically in the 60s, but just, even going back before the 60s and after the 60s, but all the murder, I think, is indicating this kind of feud between these occult groups.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
I can't find anything that shows that, but I mean, war between religions is a fact. War between philosophies is a fact. I mean,
exactly.
What is war on the occult world besides one murder here, a murder there, one missing person here, another there, and there's a lot of missing persons.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. Sometimes I think it's even over like money or cult members, in a sense, not like members, but like, this person's gaining too much traction and sucking up other people's attention besides mine. They gotta go, and then because of that, money's getting fucked up.
There's this murder that happens. I didn't write down the date of this one, but there's this guy. His name was Marcio Timon. You look him up. Dude was found in his own apartment there, away from Los Angeles. I think Oakland. But anyways, he was found in his home where it was apparent suicide. But it was of such a sort that the detectives of the time ruled it a murder, but an unsolvable murder. And he was occult paraphernalia. I mean, he was one of these guys that did these mail-in occult things. I mean, this was really big in the 40s and 30s, 40s, that you can just mail in, you like wanted to take a neophyte course from the OTO. You just mailed it in, and it wasn't like a thing, you didn't have to come down for an initiation. it was just a mail in. You want to talk to the Rosicrucians, you just mailed in. They send you some kind of chick track or whatever.
That has to be like the biggest scam going for those types of things.
Right.
That has
Oh,
to be,
jeez,
yeah.
absolutely. I mean, you didn't really have to teach them anything at all. You just whatever.
Yeah, I've definitely seen and come across those, and I guess my career and practicing magic, and I was just like, yo, do people actually like fall for this?
Yes,
they do. I've come across plenty.
To write a silver broomstick is still like the #1 Wicca book of the United States. So I mean,
wow.
Silver Ravenwolf was doing something with that book.
Oh my god!
Oh, people are still buying them up, man.
Ravenwolf, holy crap! That right there sold an extra few thousand books, probably.
I'm sorry, my bad. I didn't mean to drop it like that.
No, it's all right. No, because I've heard of that name. So I mean,
yeah.
There's some names out there where it's like, yo,
when I was a kid, when I was a teenager messing around learning, I mean, that was the first book that I grabbed, was how to write a silver broomstick. It wasn't even, I mean, I'm 41 years old. I mean, when I was 15, there was no such thing as Harry Potter, right? So I wasn't like, I was going to go figure out how to play some Quidditch. It was just an introduction to Wicca.
Yeah, it's funny how like it's I guess you don't think about it when you're young, but it's like if you realize that the author's got to like use like some silly name as a marketing scheme for the book, it probably sucks.
Right. Aimed at kids,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something about Laurel Canyon I was going to bring up too. The fellowship. I don't think they're that close, but even talking about California and cults, unfortunately, I don't think they're really that close to Laurel Canyon. But I mean, even have the Fellowship of Friends out there. That is weird, and I mean, and they were all tied into like one section of Google. Like I think there was like almost a whole department that was basically ran by Fellowship of Friends people. So that's they make their own wine too. They have their own company for wine. They have this big outside like amphitheater. It's like they put on art shows and everything and bands and all sorts of crazy stuff. Cali's definitely popping for cults.
There's just everything. I mean, one of the things that we were looking at too is like the rise of like vampire cults. I mean,
oh, nice.
You go to you go to New Orleans, you're gonna find out in Louisiana that there's vampire cults. I mean, I think that's probably thanks to Anne Rice or something, right? I mean, maybe it's her fault, maybe it's not, maybe she just kind of. But anyways, definitely someone made it popular. Well, there's Bela Lugosi was kind of a big deal in the Hollywood scene, especially after Nosferatu came out, and there seemed to have been a spawn of, well, today you can talk to people who talk quite openly about bloodletting and consumption of each other's blood. And that means that it's not a far of a stretch to say that there isn't a vampire cult in Los Angeles, Hollywood, California.
I think it's certainly possible. I mean, I think some of these ideas seem a little ludicrous, like at first glance, but I actually encountered a vampire cult in Kentucky that was doing exactly that.
Gosh.
And they later murdered some folks in Florida, and then went to they got busted in Louisiana because apparently that's headquarters for vampire activity down in New Orleans.
Right. And apparently it's human blood too that seems to be the most potent.
Oh yeah.
That's going to be a cult principle around. They're going to say that human blood's going to be the most potent animal, like being the least potent possible, but it needs to be, obviously blood, of course, but human fluids definitely top of the line for when it comes to occult ritual. So it just seems to make sense, You
come out of here.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's their theology to the most extreme, right?
Yeah, well, I tell people it's like they believe this. I mean, if you talk to a Christian who's really walking in their faith, they're really following, a Catholic who goes to mass and does, follows all the sacraments and they believe in this. These people are at that level. They have faith in their occult belief system.
Yeah, for sure.
That is just as potent as any honest to goodness Mormon, any to goodness Jehovah's. I mean, this is faith, this is belief, and it exists in any kind of philosophy just as well as it does in a Christian sense.
Yeah.
Even within the Mass, you're drinking the blood of Christ as it morphs into from wine.
Yeah.
Right.
Every Sunday. Yeah. One of the things I was going to mention to your point about influential of Laurel Canyon, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, 1966, you have, the most perfect empirical data showing that you could go from the Beach Boys in May to anti-war songs in December, and how the entire American public switches on a dime.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when you see that, let's just say, and Nick's mentioned this numerous times, especially with true crime, that's put out there to see how data is collected, how the American public receives it and responds to it. If anything, this point in time, 1966, if that could happen, that was proof positive to any institute studying the human mind, how influential you could be on the American public.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Protests became day or night,
Yeah.
Well, even
Beatles, everybody.
Even Hollywood. I mean, just think about, if you really think about all of this, the cults, Hollywood, and what we were just saying right now, all of that basically depends on someone captivating everybody else.
Right.
Yes.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mentioned, what's his name? Vito Polakis. Horrible. I'm pronouncing names, but he was the guy that started what was known as the freak scene. And what they would do is they would go in and they would just do these bonkers things in the businesses and cause a ruckus. And what would be a modern comparison? Those the dances that would just pop up everywhere. What were those called?
Oh.
That was a thing for a while.
Flash mobs or flash.
Oh, yeah, you
mob.
remember
There you go,
that?
flash
The
mobs.
pillowcase fights out of
That's
nowhere.
doing the freak thing, man.
Yeah.
And
That's right.
but the design was obviously instigating a specific idea. You call people the thing that what you're doing, you attribute to someone else, right? We see that today too, where you're protesting a specific, you're this term and you're doing these things that we're actually doing, but we're blame projecting. And that's part of that. And you can go from one idea to another idea to another idea. And just like Nick mentioned earlier on with the guy, Floyd, I can't
George
breathe.
Floyd.
That became a thing. George Floyd, that became a thing, right? It just didn't take very long for everybody to start throwing money at BLM right there.
Exactly.
There's times things happen and it's
That's
like
Hollywood.
they literally will have I saw this stuff before last year's election. There were things that would happen and literally with a day or two there was some sort of T-shirt to buy with that line on it. It's
Right. It didn't take long for T-shirts to come on.
Really?
It's funny you say that because I saw a New York City earthquake T-shirt this afternoon
No way.
for sale on Twitter.
No way.
Someone took a picture and posted on Twitter. Yeah, from the streets of New York City.
I guess if you do your own silk screening, like I know some people that
do
do
whatever.
podcasting, they do their own T-shirts. You could
Yeah.
easily just make that up right now. Yeah.
Said I survived
Because
the New York
everybody's going to
earthquake.
buy it now. They're going to forget about it next week, but
Yeah.
Right.
they'll get it today. And
Quick
that's
buck, yeah.
what we're talking about with Lookout Mountain. That's exactly the kinds of things that they were doing with their commercials and experimenting on the human populace, on the American populace, on what we can get them to buy.
Yes.
Remember, it was the United States government that convinced parents to spray their children with DDT so they wouldn't get flies on them.
Oh yeah.
That was the American government, and it convinced millions.
So is that where Ronald Reagan filmed his GE commercials for 20 years when he was the GE spokesperson?
Probably.
Because he's famously, he worked at Lookout Mountain, right? Like he was known to be there.
Right.
I think so. I think so.
I didn't know that about Reagan.
Oh, he
Probably
was
the
the GE
ultimate film
spokesperson
studio.
for years. That's where he made all of his money. Talking GE stuff on
Jeez,
late
there you
night
go.
programs. Because back then the commercials were live. They'd be like, "Oh, well, now we're cutting to Ronald Reagan to tell us about General Electric." Or
Right.
Johnny Carson would just read a, do a live read. Like you'd hear on a podcast, but it'd be a live read on
Right.
the Tonight Show as for commercial break. It's kind of funny.
Johnny Carson and Bob Hope were the ones that were often seen at Lookout Mountain, right?
They were regulars there too. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, the comedians, right? The comedians promoting
Something up with
it.
those damn comedians, man. I'm telling you.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, it's I find it interesting because just even I think nowadays people seem to think all these comedians are the ones giving them all this insider knowledge.
Right.
And it's just come on. I don't know.
Yes. No.
Especially what were you on the show when we were showing symbols or something? We're like, oh, that was the same necklace Cat Williams was wearing. I didn't know that was Masonic.
Oh yes. That's right.
Well, we were just
It
talking
was
about that on the
safe.
JFK show too. The comedian is who introduced the
Yes.
Fruiter film.
Yes.
Dick Gregory.
Dick
He was
Gregory, thank you.
Like, why is a stand-up comedian the guy who's got the Fruiter film to show the world? You know, like that's kind of a strange circumstance.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think,
Yeah,
like,
I
I
mean,
would think
crazy.
if you really are doing data analysis and testing, I think that they'd realize that somebody that makes people laugh would be the best person to stab him in the back.
Right.
You'll never expect that ever
That's
coming.
a good point.
Right.
No.
Well,
It's
I
a
mean, that's
weakness.
why
I
the
think
kings kept the jester around. The jester was the only one who could tell the king what's up for real. He was
Right.
allowed
Yeah.
to do
He
that.
was
because
really
he
the
was
go-between.
moron.
If you think about that,
Right.
very Tahuti, very almost like demon-like
That's
too, in
right.
a sense, crossing back and forth. You know,
Okay.
I think that's one of the ways to gain somebody's trust is to make them laugh first, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
yes.
Laughing or
Disarm them, yeah,
syncopated
take on their
music.
defenses, yeah.
Yeah, good music for sure. They
Yeah,
could touch
yes,
people's hearts without even
syncopated.
saying
Yeah, yeah.
anything.
The 6/8 beat.
Interesting.
So, like, speaking to the
syncopated
subconscious, the
drumming.
music.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yeah, drumming was used for alternate
Yeah.
You know
states
what's
of mind.
something?
Trance.
Something I think I mentioned with Lisa recently that I thought was just questionable because it's just like, you know, you can never tell nowadays when you start questioning like what the CIA might have been doing or not. But like I was even like, yo, when you see these chicks freaking the hell out for the Beatles, it's like, how do you know they weren't actually paid to be out there in the crowd and act like that just to make people think that's a normal way to react?
Oh,
We
yeah.
had the
I'm
same with
pretty
we had
sure
the same with
that's
Michael
what happened.
Jackson.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We had the same with Michael Jackson. Same with Elvis Presley.
I even think
You
like
can follow that.
a lot of weird sexual stuff, I do think, honestly, probably isn't
Right.
even real when the person's presenting it for them. But they're just handing the idea for people to grab onto.
Well, the power. I mean, gosh, man.
You just have to
sexual
come
energy
up with
is
an idea.
beyond powerful.
You come up with something that sounds sort of new, people jump all over it somehow. You know, they want to be a part of something.
Buy a shirt from with the earthquake in New York.
Right.
Yeah, we're a
It's all the
podcast.
rehashing of all these old fads, you know, like glasses, like sunglasses that were popular in the late '80s, early '90s, or something.
Oh
like,
man,
the new fad
Wayfarers are
again.
back.
Yeah.
You see that? Wayfarers by Oakley.
Yep.
You
It's not
know,
I mean,
Oakley. Is it Oakley? It's Oakley's.
Vanilla.
Yeah, they're Oakleys. Yep.
Ray
It's
Bans
recycled.
Wayfarers are back. Yeah,
Oh, the Ray Bans too. Okay.
the
Yeah.
Ray Bans. Yeah,
They are, yeah.
the Blues
Yeah.
Brothers and the Ray Bans. I mean, come on.
You know, Vanilla Ice was even saying some shit like that. I think like a year ago, somebody was interviewing him about like, why does it seem like the 80s and 90s are coming back? He's like, if you
Nice.
really think about it, he's like, there really ain't nothing new from then.
No.
He's
No.
like, there's really nothing new after that. He says, you had all this cool shit and then everything else was just a copy of something else. He's like, we had the neon lights, we had the crazy clothes. He's like, you know, that's,
Parachute pants.
yeah, he's like, nothing new after that.
The hair. They can't bring Aquanet back because that's been banned in the United States.
I tell you, to get rid of all the good stuff.
I like how Vanilla Ice is adding commentary on what is there is not, like, kind of.
Yeah, that's what I actually thought was
something
funnier
else.
because it was just like, yeah, he's kind of almost got a point though, but like him of all people, like what the fuck?
Well, I just love that. I love that interview. I just picture that interview where he's trying to explain how his song is different than Queen's song. It's like mine goes dun 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 da da dun dun. Theirs goes dun 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 da da dun dun. You see the difference there? You know, and it's like the same noise too. It's
Right.
he's clearly delusional.
Oh,
Yeah, that was on the night show, and it with David Letterman. My goodness, he was so young looking then.
Oh man, that's a good one.
Gosh. But I mean, gosh, yeah. So I was just looking. We've got a show releasing on Monday this coming week that we talk about the music scene, and we just start talking about people like the Birds, the Mamas, the Papas, all the big names that were really seeming to drive the countercultural music. That I think we talk about some that are not so mainstream, commonly known, but were drivers in Laurel Canyon when it came to the music scene. Because these people came and they hung out. Charles Manson recorded a couple of his own songs. There's stuff you can find, all over the place.
And he was respected amongst the musicians of the scene. I mean, you can find quotes from these musicians, especially within Dave McGowan's Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon.
Right.
Highlight a number of musicians favorably speaking of Charles Manson and his musical abilities.
Yeah, he was rejected from being in one of the bands, though. There was somebody that said I didn't really like him. But I mean, gosh, come on, you're not going to like everybody. Everybody's not going to like everybody. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, see, the Beach Boys seem to like him, because especially since they helped finance him, or at least members of the Beach Boys helped finance the cult there for a while, so they seem to be okay with him.
You know what I find funny about this whole like music industry back then too? It's like, I mean, I think for most of us, we're probably all around the same age. Like these bands were the bands my parents were listening to. And they were also the bands that they suggested me to listen to when they didn't like Metallica or Megadeth. And it's like you were still getting mind fucked from their music. Anyway, like, you know what I'm saying? These bands are already putting out propaganda, and you're telling me to listen to that instead of Metallica. What's the difference at this point?
Different flavors of propaganda.
Yeah, it was all bullshit anyway, wasn't it?
Right.
Speaking of the music scene, do y'all get into Carl Gottlieb at all?
I don't think so.
No,
I don't know who that is. I'd have to look that up. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll have to look up Carl Gottlieb. So he was the allowed journalist, I think, that ends up documenting most of these bands, puts out a majority of the films. I think he helped with Jaws and some other big film or something like that. But what I found interesting is that after his stint in the military, he went into special operations as an entertainment specialist and relocated in Laurel Canyon and was the guy hanging out with all these people.
Interesting.
And it just seemed really odd. And I think he was like part of the committee or some group like that. And I think the committee went on, I can't remember now. The committee went on to form some cult as well, like I think Committee 13 or something like that. Yeah, it was very, very fishy. I wish I would get into it more, but it's pretty interesting. I thought.
Any relation to
on the surface, at least.
That's what I was thinking.
That was where I was going. Is that I wanted to look in to see if he's related to the Gottlieb guy that the whole vid manipulation thing.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Had practiced, yeah. If that was his granddad,
yeah.
Who knows?
I think those figures. I mean, like the bands are important, and kind of the Young Turks, the actors that kind of, as framed the propaganda throughout the whole scene and whatnot. But I think the folks that I find most intriguing are these characters that are behind the scenes, be it the Gottliebs, they're pulling the strings in the scenes. There's a couple characters like that come to mind. Vita Polikas would be a very early onset of those kind of characters.
Right.
Another one that doesn't necessarily get a lot of credit, but obviously was very influential throughout this whole scene. From the band like the Doors, they named their band after this guy's book. I just forgot his name and the book's name, but he lived there. He lived there in Laurel Canyon at the corner there of Laurel Canyon and Mulholland Drive, and he was Aldous Huxley. So, he was very influential throughout this whole scene through the drug use and his books. The namesake for the band The Doors is an Aldous Huxley book. So he dies there. He died. Strangely enough, he dies there. I think on 11/22/63, the same day as Kennedy. But he dies there at his home there at the corner of Laurel Canyon and Mulholland Drive. So I think people like that are in the scene who are dictating some of this other operations. Those are the people that I find very interesting. Another one would be Phil Spector. So all these bands who weren't the actual bands, they were the wall of sound of Phil Spector. He comes to own the Beatles catalog by the time. I still haven't parsed that one out yet. It's very shifty how Phil Spector becomes the owner of the Beatles music. But by the time he murders that lady in the early 2000s in his mansion there in Laurel Canyon, which I'm sure is not the first woman he's murdered in the foyer of his mansion. The first time he got busted for it, but
that's when he got caught.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's a very important figure that really some of the details around that man and if his actions relative to the scene isn't really flushed out. Again, he ends up owning all the music from the era, including the Beatles, which isn't necessarily considered a Laurel Canyon band by many people, but obviously is a Laurel Canyon band.
Yeah. And then there's the tie-in with the 27 Club that we call it,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
all these
right.
people dying, at 27, and they're somewhere along the lines they're associated with the area of Hollywood or Laurel Canyon within their lifetime before they die or commit suicide or
Morrison was 27, right?
Yeah.
see exactly. And I think he's the first one who dies at 27. I think he's basically the founding father of the 27 Club. I mean,
And the psychedelic era. Yeah.
Well,
Mama Cass is in there too, right?
Mama
From the Mamas
Cass.
and the Papas.
That's right.
So she's a
Yes.
process adjacent character in that whole storyline, and she actually ends up dying in London. I think right across the street from MI6, the headquarters of MI6.
That's right.
Jimi Hendrix, I think, was also, right?
Hendrix.
I think
Yep.
so too.
Yep.
Who also frequented Laurel Canyon as well. That's very interesting.
Oh,
It's
Hendrix
just-
was big
it's
in the
just
Laurel
fun.
Canyon scene. His best
He
friend
was
was
huge
Jack
in-
Nicholson.
Yep.
Yep. He was often seen hanging out with Nicholson and the Monkees there in Laurel Canyon.
Monkeys, that was the other one.
Oh,
God,
that
I
was
remember
trying to
them on
think
TV.
of.
Peter Tork, yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
See, and think
Wasn't
about that.
that
They had their
the-
own TV show, the Monkees. I mean,
Yes.
they're influential. You have to think
Absolutely.
about that.
Big time, yeah. Like growing up, I
Oh.
remember seeing like the Monkees TV show and being like, "Oh, that's the American Beatles."
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
That's
kinda
what I
how
was just
that's
gonna
how I
say.
pictured
That
it,
that was the U.S.'s answer to the Beatles. That's kind of how
Exactly,
I pictured the Monkeys. Yeah.
It's just so funny if
Yeah,
you think
sure.
about like Monkees and Beatles competing. Like those are very like occultic. It's just occultic ideas in itself
Well,
too.
they create those competitions. These people don't really compete.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
but it's just
they
like
don't
you
e-
pick
some of these guys don't
pretty
even know
interesting
others
characters.
exist. I mean, they're in their own little worlds.
Maybe the Monkees were like Shriners.
I mean, yeah, every Shriner's a Freemason. Not every Freemason's a Shriner.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, gosh, the LSD scene is huge. The acid scene is huge. But I mean, I wonder how much of that was ported in from the Nazi experiments, because the Nazis were using LSD for astral projection and trying to do Montauk Project things too. So there's all these like weird little tie-ins because you can use LSD sounds and a couple of other things to cause people to do what you want them to do.
Mm.
You know,
Another Gottlieb.
Yeah. Okay, right.
Manchurian candidates and stuff.
Yo, I swear, Sydney. I think I said this one other time. It's just I think it's weird. I do question if Inspector Gadget was based off of Sidney Gottlieb. Because,
really?
yeah, well, all right, Sidney Gottlieb made gadgets kind of like 007 shit before he got into MK Ultra. And he had a daughter named Penny. In the cartoon, Inspector Gadget has a niece named Penny, and he's all about gadgets.
That's
Fair
a
enough.
good point. Yeah.
And if
They
you
got
kind
you.
of take both of their faces, the nose is a little similar.
Yeah. Well, if you want to
The
tie
big
into the
nut.
Idaho 4 series we do, Nick, that
Right.
the guy who created the Inspector Gadget cartoon is Sam Bankman-Fried's partner in that Moonstone Bank in rural Washington.
The Moonies. Which goes back to
That's
Keith. Which goes back to Keith Moon in the
It's
Doors.
a real movie. That's right.
Oh man, wow, that's
I
weird.
didn't know that about Gottlieb, though. That is interesting that he could be the influence for Inspector Gadget. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, I think me and Thrash are covering MK Ultra, and I think I started bugging out on that. I think I had the thought while we were doing it. I was like, "Yo, that's
Nice.
weird."
Revelation.
Yeah, yeah, it was definitely a weird one.
Wow.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just like everything's like, 33 degrees off of, something. Doesn't take a whole lot to make a connection somewhere.
but you know what I've also
Right.
been saying for a while. I do think at some point MK Ultra they realized we don't need the drugs anymore, and I think this is a good possibility of where they went with it.
Yeah,
Music.
fair enough.
You know, it's
Well,
like,
that's just what I was
you know
saying.
what? You'll go cop
Yeah.
the drugs for us.
Right. Yeah, the syncopated beats. The
Come on, you want to
6/8
go
beat
hang out with the deadheads? You got to drop acid.
enter you into yeah.
No, I think that's I mean, look
Go
at
get it
the,
yourself and buy it
not
from
necessarily
us.
Laurel Canyon band, but sorry, go ahead, Nick.
No, I'm done.
Well, I was just saying, yeah, I think there's something to that, right? Because like you look at concerts like the Who concert from Halloween, I think of '78 in Cincinnati, Ohio. Like that seems to me like that was some sort of occult ritual, like where they're playing the music and causing the crowd to react in some capacity and stampeding folks. It all seemed very
The Doors would have
kind of
like fire pits at their shit sometimes.
Yeah,
It almost looked like ritualistic, especially when they went into drum solos. Yeah.
There's always tie-ins with
Burning
the
Man's a good
bonfires.
example, yeah.
I mean, you don't have to draw too far if we're saying bonfires. You're Burning Man. I mean,
Yeah, you have
That's
an
a-
actual.
You're still coming out saying you're the
Dionysian-
Lizard King. I mean, what's going on here?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's that Dionysian occult ritual stuff I'm talking about. Hidden.
Yeah, I wonder how many people that attend Burning Man question the giant man, mock sacrifice they're doing at the burning
Nobody
that thing in the middle of the desert. Right?
Nobody questions the puka shells, the bell bottom pants. I mean, no one questions any of that, man. You're told what to wear. You're told what to
Right,
accept.
for sure.
And if you're not accepting it, someone else, they've done experiments, the lion experiment where you get 3 actors and one not an actor, and everybody's like, oh, that line's shorter than that line, and it's like, no, this one's actually shorter, but you start falling in line.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much.
Yeah, I think the music definitely helps with some sort of trance aspect to it too.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it gets you in gosh, man.
And talking about influential, I mean, Burning Man has been extremely influential in Silicon Valley. I mean, again, now you're having this offshoot into this whole new realm of us being technology. And there you go. Another mental manipulation of sorts.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far off on cult land in the deep end of Conspiracyville, but Burning Man actually ties back to the Process Church through the Cacophony
See,
Society.
I told you, 33 degrees. Everything's a degree off of Process Church, man.
The Cacophony Society is derivative, is an offshoot of Discordianism. Discordianism was created by Kerry Thornley, who was connected to the Process Church in New Orleans. So yeah, it's very.
I keep forgetting about the Discordian connection.
Yeah, big. Yeah, I think that's an intriguing little crossover there.
Well, because like I have even heard of like people like, oh, I'm getting into like this type of stuff like from back in the day when I was, in the OTO and shit, or just even in just like involved with people like that. Yeah. And it's like it's just funny. Like I never got into it. I just heard it mentioned a bunch of times. But it's like interesting how it's like, yo, you have no idea who this probably really came from, dude. Right. Like that's so weird. And it's like, yo, and you're supposed to be like this inquisitive magician occultist, and you don't even pick this up.
Well, see, that was the thing I found with John Dee. You look at John Dee, the guy was given a couple of crystals. He's like, I'm not a seer. I can't like see into things and see stuff. So he has to hire his buddy, Edward Kelly, to come and like tell me what you're seeing in that. I mean, it's all throughout. People, I mean, it's like who gives
just like
John
a middleman
Dee
trying
these
to
crystals,
trying
right?
to make money.
Exactly. Mystery group, somebody. I mean, which mystery school hooked up John Dee to create what we now call the Enochian? He didn't call it that, but later on, we call it the Enochian system of magic. Who gave him these crystals? It does. He never says.
Oh, I mean, listen to just even the Mormons' belief. This guy's putting gold plates in his hat and staring at him.
Hey, somebody just said they found gold plates in a archaeological dig in the Middle East.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't read too much about it. That's pretty much as I read because I don't.
I heard they're
some of these links. Some of these links are just rickrolls, but
I heard they did find some new stuff over by Pompeii, like new, I think, like archaeology, stuff and stuff drawn on the walls. And I will be there in like the first week of May, so I'm hoping I can record that shit.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, looking forward to that. Yeah, go to Pompeii. I'm excited for that shit.
Going to Pompeii.
Yes. What else with this subject? I mean, I know there's so many other avenues we could go.
There's a million avenues you can go down with Laurel Canyon. I mean, like I said, the connections can be traced back, if you follow some kind of occultic principle, some kind of power aim. I started digging around, looking backwards and trying to figure out some of these older belief systems, the older things. And you find Babylonian rituals, you find Ugaritic things where you had a local, what we would say witch today, but that's so loaded. But anyways, you had a person who was in charge of what was known as a gate to the other world. An ove is the word that's used. It's an ove, right? It's this place of and there was always populated with some kind of demonic presence, and they would draw it up and they could communicate and converse with this thing, and he would tell half truths because that's kind of their MO. But anyways, you start looking at ideas and principles of working with these sinister forces basically, and it's just prevalent throughout the occult, the occult principle, right? Holy guardian angel stuff. I mean, you're just trying to contact some kind of higher will, and what's saying that higher will is not something in the abyss. And pulling that abyssal thing up and power up, and it seems to feed off of sex, drugs, I mean, just gluttony, lust. I mean, it just feeds off of all these massive powerful desires that humans, because it's like humans, it feeds off of, you don't see it feeding off of animal spirits. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. Those things are just animals. They're not out there lusting after something, but they really seem to be driven after human power and emotion.
So if you're saying like vampiric then?
Something.
Yeah. Well, back to the whole concept of the vampire cult you mentioned before. Yeah.
I mean,
seems to,
we can talk about, there's, psychic vampirism, you get energy vampires, right? I mean, you get somebody that you just kind of feel tired of being around all the time because no, it's not autism. They're a freaking energy vampire,
Right.
So it's just, you got to deal with things in the real world that seems to be prevalent wherever it is. There's all these really weird tie-ins. If you talk to people who deal with the dark side, they say, look, there's mental illness that seems to be kind of in this realm. People are they're not okay mentally. And so it's just, we, as occultists, you look at things like astral projection, you look at leaving your body, and you talk about all these, abductions or possessions and all this stuff. And it's always some kind of foreign intelligence, external intelligence playing into the human mind. And that's kind of my draw and my interest. And so that's kind of what I started looking at with Laurel Canyon, because it seemed to be a zeitgeist, right? Or, well, not really a spirit of the times, but a spirit of the location. So a Zeitland, I guess, because it's a German word. So Zeitland or something, but a spirit of the land is there, and it's being fed through operations that I think people get something from.
Okay,
I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand. It's kind of like, what are you getting out of this? I don't think there's people that just do faith because they're, what I'm saying? I mean, there's something, you feel good about helping a poor or an orphan, you feel good, right? And they feel good. And what are they getting from feeding into the dark forces that they're working with, if they view them as dark forces?
Right. Presumably they probably view them as positive forces that they have to continue to appease, otherwise something bad, or they could be dark forces, but they have to continue to appease
appeasement means you're dealing with a tyrant, right? You only appease tyrants. You don't so I mean, if it's appeasement, it's tyranny.
You on it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean,
no, you got a good point with that. I always think that's a interesting thing that people should realize, like when it even comes to magic. Like if you think you're necessarily fucking with demons, there's always something you got to give up.
Yeah.
There's always a cost.
There's a cost, and that's, you have to give something to it. And I mean, you can talk to, Catholic exorcists, and it's called taking rights over a person. They gain footholds. Other people use words for footholds, but rights is more of a legal term because they seem to work off of a legal scheme. And if you follow that through, you go, okay, they're making, because I mean, you go, okay, if I were to draw something to Adam and Eve, what'd they do? They gave the rights of whatever it was that they were supposed to do over to that serpent through some kind of whatever happened. I mean, you have to look into that, but they gave rights over. And so later on, you got Jesus saying that he's the prince of the spirit of the air, or prince of the power of the air. Right. And he's the God of this age kind of thing. And so you're like, okay, so he's got rights over this land. So if you go back and you look at Laurel Canyon, and I don't know if I can follow and say, specifically Quetzalcoatl has some kind of sinister agenda at hand. It falls into the Leviathan thing, but not directly. I mean, these are culturally two different ideas. And so you look at this and go, okay, there's something here, and there's people who want to interact with it, but that something wants blood. And that tells me it's not a good thing. Good things don't usually seek life.
Sure.
Right.
That makes sense.
I mean, should I just follow through reason? Like,
Yeah.
I don't see good things wanting life for life.
No, I get what you're saying with that. Yeah, that's interesting. That makes me even like wonder about the people who died at 27.
Why 27?
Yeah, it was like an expiration, or
but why?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
For the favors that have done, or what you've gained from working with what you're dealing with. Who knows?
Or are they being sacrificed because of some other reason? Are they the victims of a necessity power struggle between, with this tyrannical force that is over the land, the spirit of that land?
That's some weird shit. It's bugged out.
I mean, whatever it is. So anyways, yeah, we're doing that series on unrefinedpodcast.com. I talk about the sinister forces on mine, Truth and Shadow. I mean, I talk about Bigfoot. Like I said, I just dropped a Bigfoot episode, but anything that comes over Laurel Canyon, I'll probably talk about it. I do these smaller episodes, they're like 10, 15 minutes, call them Shadow Shorts. Kind of makes sense with the name of the show, right? So I call them Shadow Shorts, but I probably talk about some of this stuff on the Shadow Short through time, because it makes, it gives me a chance to just talk. Lets me just kind of air out these ideas and just have a dialogue and a discourse with, myself as I think about these potentialities.
Sure.
I've thought about doing that. It'd probably be dangerous for my listeners.
It'd probably be very dangerous, Nick. You'd be all over the place, man.
Yeah,
You'd be like, I want to talk about this thing, and you won't even be there. You'll have gotten off that turnpike a long time ago.
Yeah. When you're talking about these sacrifices, I was, popped up into my head. I don't know why I'm stuck on Skinwalker Ranch. It was like those cattle mutilations. It's like, instead of like, humans over at Laurel Canyon, we just had cows over at Skinwalker.
Well, they need the blood for something.
It's true.
If they're not getting enough human blood, they're going to have to get it somewhere else.
And they were all dried out. Yeah, that's true.
Right. And there's people,
like,
there's like a report, there's like a guy who has like this little, he likes to do these light therapy things. I talked with this guy, Tobe Johnson, about it. We talked about, he had this experience with this guy who wanted to do this light therapy, but he was dressed up like one of these like indigenous, like,
shamans.
Yeah, but not the shaman, not like a shaman serious, but the goofy one, like the coyote spirit kind of goofy kind of. They have a term for it in the area. Yeah, in the Ute tribe has a name for this. It's kind of like the silly man, the jester. But anyways, he figures that the dude was basically trying to get people's life force so he can become a spirit of the land too.
Oh, wow.
Which is, what do we call that? Skinwalker Wendigo kind of situation going on there. That's spooky.
Yeah.
I can't remember what I saw it on. I could have caught it on something on TV, or literally, I think maybe my boy Carl the Crusher might have covered this. He was doing a lot of research over by Skinwalker Ranch, and there actually they let him on the property. But like eventually he started talking to people around there, and like try to talk to a lot of real Native Americans to actually get stories about the area. And he had said that like there was a few of them that he came to that had a little bit different story than what's normal, and said that land is actually cursed and fucked because there was some sort of almost, believe it or not, and he even says, unfortunately, it had to do with the Mormons and the Native Americans, and he even said himself, I used to be a Mormon, and you know what he said? I can't deny that they did this, though. So at least somebody who was still a Mormon is like, I'm not going to cover for this, and that the Mormons, I think, was sex trafficking Native American kids on that area. And then I think they cursed it for that reason. Or it just has bad energy from fucking with the Native Americans in that way. That's what they said.
That's good, JJ. That was awesome. I mean, our Skinwalker Ranch is sitting on, an insane waterways, it's
that too.
I mean, it's sitting on something that's just spiritually charged.
That goes up. Blind
Well, I
Frog
tell people
Ranch.
you can't put a battery into a charger and not expect it to be charged.
That
Yeah.
thing goes up a few ranches where, like, there's a lot of ranches that are popping up too that supposedly have all this weird activity, and that one thing of water is going through all of them.
Yeah, well, Laurel, Skinwalker Ranch sits on a land that comes in it's like this. It's not like this. It's it comes
Convex.
down and then up, and that's weird. That's a mound. That's mound principle stuff.
It's like eye stuff, like cornea
Right.
stuff. Yeah.
You know what I've
Probably goes
even
back to
wondered
the
about,
process
like
church.
things like I thought might be like a vantage point to mounds, and what you're explaining right there would be perfect. And I know this kind of sounds cheesy, but to me it does make sense. If I wanted to go, it's a little different because I guess like right now there's a clearing, but technically back in the day when there was less buildings and houses, when it was a lot more primitive, how were you going to look at the sky?
Right.
Unless you went to even a top and cut down the trees, you have to make a clearing in order to see the sky. And if you're going to go on top of a mound and you're above everything else, you have such a viewpoint of the sky at that point. I do wonder if even the mounds is just to be able to view the stars.
Well, some of them seem to be astronomical related.
Yeah, I'll say, I would mention, some of them are like that. Yeah, sure.
The Serpent Mound in Ohio seems to be. Yeah.
Yeah, that one's intriguing, but you're not really getting a good vantage point from that one. But that one is definitely aligned with the sky. Yeah, I think at its height, it's only about 4 feet, 5 feet, in height. But you have other ones like the Miamisburg Mound or the Moundsville, West Virginia Mound. Those are like 75, 80 feet tall. So those would be great for providing a vantage point for.
I mean, the mounds idea too. The Charles Manson, didn't he go to a prison that was basically built on a mound?
Yeah, Chillicothe.
Yeah, he went in that place. They considered him a moron. He was an idiot.
Yeah.
And then he comes out and he's like 173 million IQ or something, whatever.
Yeah, it's something. Yeah, it's not far off.
I mean, they considered him a moron, and then he comes out of this place and he's a genius.
Above average IQ. Yeah.
I mean, that's weird. Unless he was always a genius and he was just kind of I don't know. It doesn't compute. Basically, is what I'm saying. One thing doesn't lead to the other. It doesn't follow that you're an idiot and then you come out really smart and put together.
There's a number of that was supposedly through an MK Ultra experiment there at Chillicothe, and as the legend goes, and there's a number of those MK Ultra sites that were conducted on mound sites. I think it goes back to some sort of energy that's being harnessed.
Yeah, because they're not just built willy nilly. There seemed to be a rhyme and reason for building these mounds. I mean, it was. I mean, it wasn't like a place like Louisiana. If you don't build if you don't put your dead inside tombs above ground, they're going to wash away. And we saw that with Katrina, right? I mean,
that's true.
The mounds served more of a purpose than burial. They weren't just burial mounds. To call them that seems to be kind of misleading.
No, for sure. Yeah, and there's just so many different types of mounds too. Because you look at some place like Newark, Ohio, we don't have modern technology that can shoot a direct straight azimuth. I think it's 40 acres.
Yeah,
the straight lines they have there. We don't have that technology today with modern surveying technology. So somehow they did it a few thousand years ago, and
it's the design of the mountain. Perfectly. I mean, all these cultures and all these people, they always built mountains, ziggurats, pyramids, what have you. They were doing it to build an artificial mountain so that they can get to the top and look out and have God come down to them. I mean, if we were to say, that's the principle, you draw God down so that they can reside within. If you look at the Tower of Babel story, they wanted to draw God down. And that was the purpose of the ziggurat, to draw God down, or to be up where God's at. Because, God's dwelt at the top of mountains, thanks to the Greeks and the Romans. But Laurel Canyon, Lookout Mountain. I mean, all these places, you don't just build it. It doesn't follow, is what I'm saying. For the Army base to build an Army base on an area like where Lookout Mountain is now, Jared Leto's home, and be where it's at, because you can do the same thing that they were doing in downtown Los Angeles at the original Army base. They didn't, it just didn't follow for me. So if you put it somewhere up high, are you drawing something down?
Yeah. Well, on that same vein, that the adjacent hillside or hilltop to Mount Lookout or Lookout Mountain is Mount Olympus.
Right.
So I mean, there's they got some very Greek god namesake up there as well in that same neighborhood.
Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with the native people, the Togavas. I don't know why, but I've always felt that. But then again, I have that belief that it has more to do with the native belief system, and they're trying to draw in from that, and that it may has a ley line of some sort.
Well, they stayed away from the area from what I was reading. They didn't really go up there except for like vision questing kind of thing. It wasn't a habited place. They kind of kept away from that particular area, and that might have been why it was prime real estate to really just go in and
take it,
develop. Yeah.
The one thing I would like to get into more, and it's kind of like, I guess, why this topic interests me a lot with the Native American aspect, is because when I even had Thrash on once, he covered the Native Americans and occult symbolism. I had no idea into a lot of stuff that he showed me. I was like, yo, I've seen these in magic books. Like, it's like you have to start like, well, which came first? It's like,
fair enough.
And it's just, it is interesting when it comes to Native American and occult symbolism that I have seen in certain styles of practice or whatever. It's like you'll see definite connections, and it was weird to me. I never really thought it. I never thought that blatant. Like, I was just surprised, for me.
Well, no, I mean, there's a lot of those tie-ins, Aleister Crowley and Aiwass, and then H.P. Lovecraft and Cthulhu. I mean, there's all these like really weird cross ties between individuals that may have never met. And if that can happen when they're contemporaries, what's stopping civilizations and cultures popping up around the world, simultaneously developing systems that seem to be similar?
I have said that too before. I do think it's just my opinion. If you really start fucking with magic, I guess I'm saying even more of a positive sense, doing it for your own just well-being and not like to control the outside world. I do think in some sort of sense, like you do almost kind of tap into like an all consciousness. And sometimes I do think, is that how people come up with the same ideas when there was no way of them contacting each other?
They always develop a circle of protection. That's the other thing that was really interesting to me, is where rituals would happen. They were inside of a circle place that outside was, they were protected as long as they were within the circle.
The working there,
whatever that is. You find all these like archaeological sites where the Indians have, the Native Americans. I didn't mean to say it that way, but the Native Americans have these sites that are dug into the ground, and you would obviously have something put over the top, and they're safe inside of the thing.
I've seen that. I've actually watched something where they were showing like old Native American things, and they're like, yo, those like, you paint like, it's actually big, gigantic round rooms, and they're like, what was going on in there?
And they belonged to the group. Lisa, what was the name of the Hopi? Not the Hopi, before the Hopi.
Oh, the not Anasazis.
The Anasazis.
Oh, they were the ones that they think might have actually ate themselves.
It was the Pueblo,
but they were the Pueblo,
and then it was Hopi. So it was Anasazi, then Pueblo, then Hopi. Yeah.
But they all followed the same tradition of doing these things and using them from each other through time. But it's a circle of protection. Why build a circle of protection? To keep the evil out, because there is something dark out there, right? And so, I mean, even in the most mundane of occult practice, whether you're doing it for yourself, you still draw a circle of protection. I mean, if you do an LBR or anything like that, you're doing some kind of protecting yourself from dark and sinister forces, because they exist. You don't just do things willy-nilly, even if you're doing some kind of self-development.
I mean, even Wakanda does it. They throw a dome over themselves. They said, the motherfuckers out there are crazy.
Nice.
That's why we ain't giving you our technology either, because you'll fucking off yourselves.
Right. That's exactly the problem with technology. You're always screwing it up.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true.
Oh, that was good.
He just had to make a knife.
Right. Well, speaking of Magic Circles, it wasn't in Laurel Canyon, wasn't that the Mamas and the Papas original band name, the Magic Circle?
No.
That's a good question. I don't know.
It was something similar to that. It was a magical reference to the original band name. Just like the Grateful Dead was the Warlocks.
Yeah.
They all had
That's right. That's
these
right.
occult kind of magical. I mean, it was their original like movie posters, their concert posters.
Yeah.
They had, like Egyptian iconography, Masonic symbolism. I mean, the whole works, So I mean, the Mamas and the Papas started off as either the Golden Circle or the Magical Circle. But I think it was the Magical Circle because the Golden Circle makes no sense. Sounds like a Chinese restaurant or something.
It's really interesting.
I need to order takeout. Thank you.
That's interesting. You mentioned the Warlocks. Is that I think I mentioned this not too long ago. The Locks, the rap, those two dudes, they were called the Warlocks, and it wasn't until that they gave their tape to some chick who then gave it to P. Diddy, and he said the Locks sounds better, and they went with that when he signed them. But they were called the Warlocks also. I thought that was very interesting for that type of music, calling yourself the Warlocks.
Yeah, for sure.
Interesting.
Man. Well, I mean, Black Sabbath became Black Sabbath. I mean, they were a blues, I was looking at that a while ago. I was kind of like, gosh, I would never call my band name that. That's kind of that's a blues, whatever. It was probably a tribute band kind of thing. And then they became Black Sabbath, right?
Yeah, they were very much outwardly Crowley supporters though, right? I mean, kind of early on, right? Like, I know like they.
Well, I don't know
Ozzy
about
later
that
does a Mr. Crowley song,
right? But there's a denial that he just did it just
Well, I have heard some people say, like, technically, like, they're both kind of over from the same area, and the guy didn't pronounce his name correctly. I've heard people even say, like,
yeah, because it's you
Crowley. He was Mr. He was saying Crowley, not Crowley.
Right.
So people go with like, how well was
call me Crowley? You think I'm Crawley? Call me Crawley.
Yeah,
it's just whatever.
But I mean, I don't know. I do wonder about that. I mean, that's even to the point to where even if he wasn't into him, he just made a whole bunch of people know who he is.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's a CIA tie-in. That's the whole point, right?
You know how many listeners know
to something if you have more people doing it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in and of itself, that is kind of a magical act, right? Causing those people to suddenly recognize.
Yes.
Crowley.
Yeah, and there's power in specific charged words. I mean, it
could even have been. Did he pronounce it differently because that sound
his
just
English
worked
accent.
better? You know what I'm saying? Or was there magic in that word being pronounced that way that just worked better?
Right.
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah,
With that shit.
know,
It rhymed better with the rest of his flow.
Exactly. It sounds more appealing to the ear to mindfuck your senses.
He had a bat head in his mouth when he was trying to sing, so he missed
trying to sing.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Just fucking.
You see that interview? He's talking. He's like, he looks so young in that video. He's like, nah, somebody just threw something on the stage. And it's like, who does that? Who just picks something up off the ground and,
eats the bat, right?
Eats the bat head. He's like, it was gross.
Yeah, like it's normal to pick shit up off the stage and bite it, but what the
Right.
fuck, it was real? That's funny. It goes back to the whole snake talking to the chick again. Like, you don't question that part.
Yeah.
Why are you picking anything off the floor and trying to
normal
bite
to
its
you.
head off to begin with?
Randomly, right? You
If
just
it's fake or
randomly
not.
Pick something up. Come on, dude. Pull my other leg and play Jingle Bells.
Right.
Yes, that was good.
Sorry.
It was Magic Circle, JJ. It was Magic Circle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah, I knew they had a lot of that occult kind of magical undertones to the early band
Find
names in
out.
Laurel Canyon
The
too.
Magic Circle.
Yeah.
Spelled with a Y instead of an I.
Yeah.
Is Cat Stevens around there too? What was that guy from? Because he like kind of turned weird and got into like my opinion, like occultism.
Yeah, I don't know if he was directly related to the.
I was just wondering if he was like hanging around with those people at all.
Laurel Canyon. What did he get into Sufism? What was his shtick?
I just remember, like, even as a
right?
kid, like, my father had his albums. I remember I used to just love looking at albums. And I just remembered at some point in his albums, I was like, what the fuck? And I was just, like, stuck trying to figure out what the hell am I looking at. So, my father even said he got into some sort of Buddhist crap. I don't know. So, I mean, I'm sure it's not even Buddhism. My father was probably completely wrong.
You follow, Crowley, you're going to find Vedanta eventually. I mean, that's prana. I mean, you're gonna find something.
Oh yeah, well
right?
that's just
Crowley's gonna lead you into yoga, yoga practices. He'll lead you into Sufic practices. I mean, it's Naqshbandi I think it was Naqshbandi Sufism that was Crowley's thing.
I think there's something deeply with this Sufism shit. I really do think that there's it's not understood enough to where I think there's a lot of magical mind.
They're not all the same either. They don't all do the dance. They don't all do the twirling dancing thing. I mean, that's designed to get you into an altered state of mind anyways and do the Dagger and stuff. I mean,
I think Floyd was even some of their members were even interested in some like weird offshoot, I think, of Sufism or something.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I could be completely wrong. It was something weird when I think.
Well, California brought all of that stuff in, man. If you want to talk about Los Angeles, they then didn't just bring in the Rosicrucians, the OTO, and the parsonage. I mean, they brought in yoga, they brought in Sufism, they brought in all of these different systems that were, mysticisms, I should say, were really popular in Los Angeles. Yeah, still are popular in Los Angeles.
It's really interesting. They do tend to, they seem to be able to sell it really well out there too when they come out with these occult techniques and hand it to the citizens, right? Like they fucking put a nice fucking, package deal on it for people to buy into.
A beautiful guy, a beautiful girl doing poses. I mean, it's
worshiping people on TV. Got Hollywood for that.
Jane Fonda. I mean, which mom didn't have a Jane Fonda tape in here? I mean, honestly.
Right, yeah. Well, that's funny you mentioned that because I was actually thinking of the juicer guy too, because he lived in Laurel Canyon, I think, too.
What?
And like the guy that created that whole juice movement. I can't think of his name right now. But
Jack LaLanne.
Yeah, Jack LaLanne. Yeah, he created like a whole movement out of that situation. So yeah, I mean,
imagine that.
Transcends into the health community as well with Jane Fonda.
All I can do is think of the Jim Carrey skit where he's doing the juice. I'm sorry, it's not Jack LaLanne I'm thinking about.
Some guy's stuffing a blender full, and he's like, "Yo, I'm gonna make millions doing this. You watch."
That's right.
Yeah, if it wasn't Jack, if it wasn't Jack LaLanne, it was one of those health nut guys who was in Laurel Canyon doing, some sort of like health cult almost, right? Yep. So it seems like California, all varieties of cults, every size, shape, and flavor.
I mean, even that new one that's really popular, veganism.
Yeah.
Terrible. I shouldn't say it that way.
Veganism
isn't a religion. I mean,
they get very butthurt if you call them a cult.
Yeah, that's right.
You insinuated some sort of organizing committee.
It's a mail-in one. You don't have to go anywhere.
Right.
They send you stuff.
Yeah, they need to bring back more of those. The mail-in cults. That sounds like a good idea.
There's one down out of Mount St. Helens, or not St. Helens. My goodness. The big one. They do one down there at Mount Shasta.
Mount Shasta. Yeah. They couldn't think of Mount Shasta.
There's a group that's kind of like an OTO. They have letters like that, and they
really
have mail-in. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a guy who's got a podcast
in Northern California, huh?
Oh,
that's like a new age Mecca, right? Like Mount Shasta.
Mount Shasta's insane. I mean, they say that. I mean, just looking at it, if you look at it on a map, it's not connected to any mountains. Yeah. It's basically like a geographical or it's a pyramid, but made out of the ground. The earth has made this pyramid, as opposed to
it's very overwhelming too as you're driving northbound from like Sacramento.
It's massive when you go through
everywhere in the sky. It covers the whole sky.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very imposing.
Huge mountains.
I think we'll just, if you don't mind, I think we'll wrap it up here. I think this is a good way to end the show. Cool. I would also like it. I would also not be opposed to talking about this again some other time. So
yeah, just hit me up.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of more things, different avenues.
I can ramble on forever if you just
Yeah, I'm sure if I ask JJ,
I'll talk.
If I ask JJ, he'll give me an outline in a week. He'll be like, "Yeah, I can talk about this, and we can make something happen." So, yeah, not a problem. I had a really good time too. Really, for real.
Thanks.
Yeah. Really had a good chat with all of us here. This was a good panel, I think, for this topic. Lisa, would you like to plug where everybody can find you?
Yes, absolutely. On Twitter, it's Solis Lisa, and on Instagram, it's Lisa Solis.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And JJ, just real quick, let everybody know where they can find your stuff as well.
JJ Vance, host of Operation GCD, got it right there on the screen. Nick, Lisa, appreciate the invite back. Great conversation.
Always.
BT, excellent to meet you. Enjoyed the discourse here.
Thanks. Yeah.
Definitely looking forward to doing it again sometime.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And real quick before we let the guest himself plug himself again, real quick. This is going to be our third time for JJ this week. I give him credit, man. yeah. He's like, yo, by the end of Sunday, he's going to be tired of seeing my face. Sunday at 1:00, we're also going to be starting for people who are listening live now. We're going to be kicking off part 1 of the Smiley Face Killers investigation series Sunday around 1ish. So check that out. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on, JJ. I really appreciate it. Like I said, you were just on 2 days ago.
Man. Appreciate it.
And now back to BT. My man, thank you very much. I thought that was a great chat. Honestly, it was much more interesting to me than the first time. Like I said, hopefully this would make up for it. And you definitely did. And I really would like to actually talk about this topic again some more in the future. So I'll have to get you back on. Let everybody know where they can find your stuff one more time.
Yeah, so Truth and Shadow podcast. That'll search in any platform you're looking at, YouTube, Audible, etc. Truth and Shadow. It's spelled out, not the ampersand. And then I'm on Instagram, truth underscore between each of my words podcast. You'll find me on Instagram. And then BT Wallace, self-published author on Amazon.com. You can find my books, The Case of the Man of Ash. I basically take the old school way of doing novelette noir, and I'm working on a series, just doing some Lovecraftian horror.
Oh, nice. Awesome.
Very nice.
If you want, after this show, send me all the links for like your book, everything. Send me all of that.
Yeah, of
and
course,
I'll put that in the bottom with
Not
the
a
show
problem.
notes. I appreciate that. And again, I appreciate.
Nice to meet you, Lisa. Nice to meet you, JJ's pretty sweet.
Wonderful
Nick,
meeting you too.
nice to see your face again.
Yes. I had a really good time. This was really good chat. I was happy to spend my Friday night like this. And thank you, everybody who jumped in on the live. I know, unfortunately, since it's live on Facebook and Twitter, I cannot see your comments, which is kind of why I went live, because I don't have to worry about paying attention to the chat. I'm just going to keep it honest. Yeah, it screws me up. And the first time the guy's on the show, I got to pay attention. So, cut me some slack. But I can go live on there and not have to worry about it. So thank you, everybody who jumped in on that. And again, thank you all for coming on. And that is the end of another Occult Rejects. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.